night shift gas station clerks. What's the weirdest thing you've ever encountered? Story 1. I worked in a rural gas station slash garage when I was in high school. One evening I was working and there were some pretty bad storms brewing. It didn't take very long for there to be a fairly large group of people stopped at the station to find some shelter. I didn't think much of it. It wasn't the first time it had happened. But then they started blowing the tornado sirens. All of a sudden, there's a bunch of adults and families looking at little 16-year-old me looking for answers. There's no basement, so I did the first thing I could think of and shoved them all in the walk-in cooler, shut us all in, and rode out the storm. When it passed, I went out and there was a big plate glass window busted and some stuff blown around the store. All the people came out of the cooler and were pretty much like, "See you later," and left. I was pretty much left there by myself, thinking like, what just happened? Opinion. That's really impressive quick thinking for a 16-year-old. Most people that age might just freak out and not know how to handle it. Story 2. I had a friend who worked at a gas station. He said someone came in one night and produced a long-distance hole puncher and told my friend to empty the register. Being completely dumbfounded by the situation, my friend told him that he had to buy something first. This is because to open the register, an item from the gas station needed to be scanned at the register. According to my friend, they stared at each other completely silent and bewildered for a few seconds. After that, my friend had regained enough of his faculties to explain this to the robber. Then the robber scanned the Twix, took all the money in the register, and left. Opinion. Props to your friend for staying calm in that situation. I can just picture the robber thinking, a Twix would be the perfect finishing touch to this heist. Why not treat myself? It seems like every night shift workers have stories about bizarre things they encounter. Story 3. Years ago, I worked overnight at a gas station in a pretty bad neighborhood in Florida. On my first night working there, an older guy came in, walked up to the counter, and reached across and punched me in the jaw pretty hard. The guy I was working with chased him out the door while I called the cops to send someone over. My coworker came back in pretty quick, looking frightened, and said to send an ambulance because the crazy guy just fell unresponsive outside. The EMT and police arrived. The guy was alive, but had a pretty bad heart attack. Every other shift was pretty timid compared to that. Opinion. What an awful way to start the day. But that's instant karma for the guy. If that had happened to me, I would try to find every excuse to use the line, "If you think the punch was bad, you should have seen what happened to the other guy." Story 4. I was working at a mobile late one night in my hometown, which is a summer vacation hotspot, when a middle-aged man who looked like he just walked off a golf course. He was obviously a little drunk, but drunk middle-aged men who golf was the norm for tourists, so I took no heed. He came up to the counter and I heard him ask me if there were any gay bars in town. I told him no, that the closest one I was aware of was in Provincetown, a gay hotspot which was an optimistic hour's drive away with traffic. He then asked me if I was interested in fooling around with him. I replied no, and in an attempt to soften the rejection, I joked, "I don't think my girlfriend would be too happy about that," which seemed to excite the guy as he redoubled his efforts. His big pitch was that he had an especially nice van that we could pull into the garage bay to use. Granted, it looked like a nice van, but it didn't sway my stance. After another 5 minutes, he seemed to resign to his fate and left the store. I thought we were done and went back to reading. Half an hour later, I hear a car start up and leave the lot. I didn't realize he had just stayed in his van and was waiting for me. I figured, creepy, but whatever, he's gone. So I put it out of my mind. A couple hours after that, I was closing up shop, and I had to go out on a ladder to change the prices on the sign for the next day. The town was deserted at this point, and all the lights at the station are off, save a couple in the garage. While I'm up on the ladder, the same van screeches back into the lot. I am up on a ladder in the dark alone, not thrilled about this development. He hopped out and hollered, "I forgot to pay you." I figured that I had given him smokes or something, and just forgot to charge him as I was rejecting his advances. So I asked him, "For what?" He replied, "I forgot to try and pay you for a good time." I paused. He yelled, "$250. It occurred to me that I could probably just take the dude's money and run, but I correctly assessed that would be really stupid. So I yelled, "Come on, man. No means no, it's still on the ladder." He yelled, "Jesus Christ, fine," and peeled out. Never saw him again, thankfully. Opinion: I love that he yelled "Jesus Christ, fine" as if you were overreacting. Story 5. I don't know if this was necessarily weird, but more luck. During and after high school, I worked at this gas station that closed up at 11 p.m. I started doing my cleaning duties when I noticed a penny on the ground. I picked it up and kept sweeping until I noticed a dime by the door. This wasn't unusual since people drop change all the time. As I was picking it up though, something caught my eye. As it blew past the door, I went outside, looked right, nothing. Looked left, and there sat a fat wad of cash. It was nearly $300 laying on the ground. Yes, I kept it. No one ever stopped back by asking about it either. Opinion: what a lucky find. It's amazing how doing your duties led to discovering that cash. The surprise of finding $300 like that must have felt incredible, especially with no one coming back for it. Story 6. I was a 7-Eleven night clerk for about 5 years when I was young. Nothing too outrageous happened. The big nightly event was the 2 a.m. rush, the cutoff for selling alcohol. When I had run a bar through the beer cooler doors, there was always a bunch of people coming in just before, and always a few coming in after that would beg and argue I'd just have to say no. One time around 3 a.m., an older, drunk but well-dressed Mexican guy comes in. Two really pretty girls with him argues, and pleads with me to sell him some beer for about 15 minutes. He was oddly pleasant, seemed like a guy no one said no to. But I said no. He went out with the girls and then came back in alone, looked at me and smiled, pulled a giant wad of bills from his pocket, peeled off a 20, set it on the counter, walked over to the cooler, and pulled out a case of beer through the bars. Then, as I'm telling him I can't sell that to him, he reaches in his pocket and pulls out a bag of that white illicit powder, wags it into the air in front of me significantly, sits that on the $20 bill and says, "Está todo bien, mi amigo," with a wink, and walks out the door with the beer. Another time around 3 a.m. again, these two young girls came in and wandered the store for about half an hour. They were laughing at everything, literally rolling on the floor laughing, reading the labels of the candy bars, and stuff like that. I talked to them enough that they told me they had eaten some mushrooms. Finally, they picked out a couple of candy bars and a couple of sodas. At the counter, I rang them up, and they realized they didn't have any money, which was hilariously funny, and they were on the floor laughing again. I begged their stuff and told them not to worry about it. Sweeping the lot after they left, I could hear them still laughing down the street. Opinion: bold move by that guy to try and bribe you. The second one is pretty funny. I guess not all the illicit substances are that bad. Story 7. A friend of mine worked nights in a convenience store by herself, and she told me about a time when a woman came in drenched in blood. When asked, she said flatly, "Don't worry, it's not my blood." She bought a pack of cigarettes and was on her merry way. Opinion: not sure if she was aware that line doesn't work with someone who doesn't really care about you. Well, I guess there's nothing like a smoke after a horrendous crime, right? Story 8. A drunk guy tried to fight me for stealing his job at the gas station. He started chasing me and fell down in the street. The police called and questioned me, and then the police sergeant blew her cover when she started yelling at me for beating up her son. He was in his mid-20s, 6'2", 275 pounds. I was a short, skinny 16-year-old. Opinion. What the? This is just ridiculous. Story 9. Working security in a bad neighborhood. This guy walking minding his own business in a cowboy hat, cowboy shoes, and wearing a thong. He was carrying around a raccoon. It looked like he was feeding the raccoon something. I locked my doors ASAP. Opinion. That is such a bizarre mix. I wonder what the guy was planning to do with the raccoon. Story 10. A few things. One is a man who came in very drunk and told me that the key to happiness is that illicit white powder, some escorts, a new truck and a bottle. He then tipped me 20 bucks. Another time I had like 20 police officers in my store at the same time for no reason. Opinion. Not sure if I agree or disagree with the first guy's key to happiness, but that definitely is not your usual gas station advice. And I guess the whole SWAT team needed snacks and drinks before their stakeout. Story 11. Not a gas station, but a train station cafe. There were overnight works going on, so we stayed open until 1 or 2 a.m. for the builders. One night, this old gentleman comes in, well dressed, asks for a coffee but can't pay when I make it. I give it to him anyway since I'll just throw it otherwise. And he asks me for some cake. I refuse, and he goes, I sing for my supper, and then starts to belt out Frank Sinatra, right there in the shop, and he just won't stop. He's there for like half an hour. I tried to get security to look after him because he clearly wasn't all there. Found him later singing for the builders who were giving him sandwiches. Eventually called the local police who got him supervised until he could catch a train home in the morning. Opinion. That is clearly a bard, and they seem to have failed a performance check. I would have given him the cake if he was good enough. Or maybe he was trying to be as obnoxious as possible, so you would give him the cake to shut him up. Story 12. I don't work in the night shift exactly, but this will work. So, my store closes up at 10 p.m. I came in one morning at around 4:45-ish to find an old Native American man passed out in our kitchen. We have a rather large kitchen because we work next to an industrial area with lots of truck drivers/oil field workers who start their work day early. So we make lots of food for breakfast and lunch. So I call the police because what am I supposed to do? There's a very bad neighborhood behind the store that's constantly hit by the police looking for illegal substances, like hard stuff. Plus we find bloody needles in the bathrooms all the time. The police show up like 15 minutes later with some paramedics and the guy was just asleep. LOL. Apparently he came in around 9:30 p.m. the night before to use the bathroom and got locked in when the 2 night shift employees locked up. He didn't have a phone and didn't think to look for hours. So he got a 6-pack of beer out, ate some of our bread, and went to sleep next to the grill. Opinion. Finding an old man passed out in the kitchen must have been a shock, especially in that kind of neighborhood. It's hilarious that he made himself at home with beer and bread. I think this is surprisingly wholesome. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell button to receive notifications to my latest videos.